What if everything you've been told about success is slightly off? Not completely wrong, just off. Like a GPS that's 1 degree miscalibrated. You follow it faithfully, you work hard, you do everything right. And yet somehow, you keep arriving somewhere slightly different from where you wanted to be. You look around at people who seem to have it figured out. Not necessarily the smartest people, not always the hardest workers. And you wonder, what do they know that I don't? Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not their resume. It's not their connections, their luck, or even their discipline. It's the way they think. While most people are busy reacting to life, putting out fires, answering every ping, running from urgency to urgency, a small group of people are quietly playing a completely different game. They're not smarter. They're not superhuman. They just learned something that nobody teaches in school, something that changes everything once you see it. They learned to think strategically. And before you picture a general hunched over a war map or a CEO in a glass boardroom, stop. That's not what this is. Strategic thinking isn't reserved for the powerful. It's not a personality trait you either have or you don't. It's a skill, a learnable, practicable, everyday skill that you can start building right now, wherever you are, with whatever you have. By the time you finish this audiobook, you won't just know about strategic thinking. You'll feel it rewiring the way you see your career, your relationships, your finances, your goals. You'll start noticing leverage points that were always there but invisible to you. You'll begin thinking 2, 3, 5 steps ahead. And most importantly, you'll stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like you're happening to life. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Wake-Up Call. Most people never get. Picture 2 people starting the same job on the same day. Same qualifications, same starting salary, same manager. 5 years later, one of them is still in the same role, mildly frustrated, wondering why things haven't moved. The other has been promoted twice, built a reputation, and is being headhunted by other companies. What happened? It wasn't that one worked harder. In fact, the one who got ahead often seemed to work less, at least in the frantic, exhausted, always busy sense. The difference was something subtler. One person was reacting, the other was directing. Most of us live in reactive mode without even realizing it. We wake up and immediately check our phones, already handing the morning to someone else's agenda. We spend our days responding to whatever shouts loudest, putting out fires, ticking boxes. We go to bed tired, feeling like we ran a marathon but somehow didn't move forward, and we tell ourselves that tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow looks exactly the same because the system hasn't changed. Only the date has. This is not a character flaw. It's the default setting of modern life. The world is designed to keep you reactive. Notifications, deadlines, other people's urgencies dressed up as your own. Reactive living feels productive because you're always busy. But busyness and progress are not the same thing, and deep down, you already know that. Strategic thinkers live differently, not because they have more hours in the day, but because they've made a fundamental shift in how they relate to those hours. They understand something powerful. Your current situation is not your permanent situation. Every circumstance you're in right now, good, bad, stuck, or in motion, is temporary. The question is whether you'll be the one steering the change, or just riding it wherever it takes you. Here's what the strategic mindset actually feels like from the inside. Imagine you're standing in a crowded train station during rush hour. Most people have their heads down, focused on their immediate surroundings, not bumping into anyone, finding their platform, making their train. But imagine if you climbed up to a balcony above the crowd. Suddenly, you can see the whole station. You can see which platforms are congested and which are clear. You can see the flow of people and where it's breaking it down. You can make decisions that the person at ground level simply cannot make. That balcony is strategic thinking. It doesn't mean you stop walking through the station. It means you occasionally rise above it, gain perspective, and then descend back into action with far more clarity than you had before. The strategic mindset is the ability to move fluidly between the ground and the balcony, between daily detail and long-term direction, without getting permanently stuck at either level. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is that everything in your life is connected. Your sleep affects your decision-making. Your decision-making affects your relationships. Your relationships affect your opportunities. Your opportunities shape your finances. Your finances influence your stress. Your stress loops back to your sleep. This isn't a chain. It's a web. And strategic thinkers don't treat their life as a collection of separate departments. They see it as one integrated living system. This matters because when you start pulling on one thread intentionally, you can create ripple effects that touch everything else. A small improvement in how you manage your mornings can cascade into better focus, better work, better relationships, and better results. Not because you overhauled your entire life at once, but because you changed one leverage point in a connected system. The last piece of the strategic mindset is what military thinkers call situational awareness. And it's one of the most underrated skills a person can develop. It's the ability to accurately read your environment, the forces at play, the people involved, the trends building beneath the surface. Most people operate with tunnel vision, focused only on what's directly in front of them. Strategic thinkers are constantly scanning, noticing signals, patterns, and shifts that others walk right past. And crucially, situational awareness starts with yourself. You cannot build an effective strategy for your life without being honest about where you actually are right now, not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, where you actually, genuinely are, strengths, weaknesses, blind spots, and all. This kind of honest self-assessment isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about being accurate, because accurate is the only thing that actually helps. Chapter 2. How Strategic Intelligence Actually Works. There's a myth that strategic thinkers are just really, really smart, that if you have a high enough IQ, strategy comes naturally. But some of the most analytically gifted people are surprisingly poor strategic thinkers, because they've been trained to find the right answer to a clearly defined problem, and life rarely offers clearly defined problems. Strategic intelligence is different. It's the ability to navigate ambiguity, to make good decisions when the information is incomplete, the outcome is uncertain, and the stakes are real. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the right mental tools for the room you're actually in. The first of those tools is pattern recognition. Everything in life follows patterns: market behavior, human relationships, career trajectories, social dynamics. The problem is most people only recognize patterns after they've fully played out, which is about as useful as reading yesterday's weather forecast. Strategic thinkers train themselves to spot patterns while they're still forming, which gives them the ability to position themselves before the crowd even realizes what's happening. Think of it like watching a wave form in the ocean. Most people only notice the wave when it's crashing on the shore. Strategic thinkers notice the subtle swell building far out at sea, and they've already paddled into position by the time the wave arrives. Developing pattern recognition means changing how you consume information. Instead of reading only for content, what happened, you start reading for structure. Why did this happen? What conditions made it possible? What pattern does this fit into? You start connecting dots across different areas of your life and work. You start asking better questions. The second tool is systems thinking, seeing how different parts of an interconnected whole influence each other. Most people think in straight lines. A causes B. But real systems are more like weather patterns. A small change in temperature can trigger a cascade of atmospheric events that eventually produces a storm thousands of miles away. Cause and effect are real, but they're rarely direct or proportional. In your own life, this might look like realizing that the reason you're struggling to focus at work isn't really about work at all. It's about a strained friendship that's draining your emotional energy, which is connected to a financial stress you haven't addressed, which traces back to a spending habit rooted in a belief about what you deserve. Pull the right thread and the whole knot loosens. Miss it and you keep treating symptoms while a cause goes untouched. Systems thinking also means learning to spot feedback loops. Some loops amplify change. A great reputation leads to better opportunities, which lead to better results, which build an even better reputation. Others resist change. Every time you try to break a habit, familiar discomfort pulls you back. Strategic thinkers learn to identify these loops and work with them rather than exhausting themselves fighting against them. The third tool is scenario thinking, holding multiple possible futures in your mind at once, rather than betting everything on a single prediction. Most people have one story about how things will unfold. When reality doesn't match that story, they're blindsided and slow to adapt. Strategic thinkers run multiple films in their heads simultaneously: best case, worst case, most likely case, and the completely unexpected case. This isn't pessimism or anxiety. It's preparation. When you've already thought through how you'd respond to various outcomes, you can act decisively while everyone else is still trying to figure out what's happening. You become the calm person in the panicked room, not because you're unaffected, but because you're not surprised. Chapter 3: The 7 Laws That Govern Every Advantage. There are principles underneath the surface of every successful life. They operate whether you know them or not, but knowing them consciously lets you work with them instead of stumbling against them. The first law: positioning. Where you place yourself determines what's available to you. Think of a surfer choosing their spot in the water before a set of waves arrives. The surfer who positions well catches wave after wave with what looks like effortless grace. The one who positions poorly paddles frantically and catches nothing. The waves are the same. The positioning is everything. In life, positioning means placing yourself in situations where good outcomes are probable and bad outcomes are rare. It means building skills that are valuable in multiple scenarios. It means being in the right rooms, the right conversations, the right networks, not through manipulation, but through intentional choices about where to invest your time and energy. The second law, timing. The same action taken at different moments can produce completely opposite results. A seed planted in spring becomes a harvest. The same seed planted in winter disappears into frozen ground. Strategic thinkers don't just ask what to do, they ask when. They study cycles, watch for inflection points, and have the patience to wait for the right moment combined with the decisiveness to act when it arrives. The third law, concentration. You cannot do everything well. The most productive people you'll ever meet are not doing more things. They're doing fewer things better. They've identified the small number of activities that will move the needle most, and they've ruthlessly cleared space for those things. Focus isn't a personality trait. It's a strategic decision made repeatedly, every day. The fourth law, leverage. In a physical sense, leverage lets you move something heavy with minimal force. If you apply it at the right point, with the right tool. Strategically, leverage means finding where small, well-placed effort creates disproportionately large results. This might be a relationship that opens doors you couldn't open alone, a skill that multiplies the value of everything else you do, a system that works while you sleep. Strategic thinkers are always asking, is there a smarter way to apply force here? The fifth law, adaptation. The map is never the territory. No plan survives contact with reality unchanged. And the people who succeed long-term are not the ones with the most detailed plans, but the ones who adapt most gracefully when those plans meet the unexpected. Adaptation isn't weakness. It's the deepest form of strategic intelligence. The sixth law, information asymmetry. Having better information than others, or processing the same information more insightfully, is one of the most durable advantages you can build. This doesn't mean obsessively consuming news or drowning in data. It means cultivating high-quality sources, asking better questions, and developing the rare ability to see implications in information that others overlook. The seventh law, optionality. Having multiple paths forward is almost always more valuable than having one perfect plan. Life is uncertain, and certainty is expensive. Strategic thinkers make decisions that open doors rather than close them whenever possible, keeping their options alive, building flexibility into their plans, and avoiding the trap of betting everything on a single scenario that reality might never deliver. These 7 laws aren't separate. They reinforce each other. Good positioning creates better timing opportunities. Timing enables effective concentration. Concentration amplifies leverage. Leverage supports adaptation. Adaptation generates better information. Better information creates more options. More options improve your positioning. It's a virtuous cycle, and once you start building it consciously, it builds itself. Chapter 4. Reading what nobody else can see. Here's something that will change how you walk into every room for the rest of your life. Every situation you encounter, every meeting, every conversation, every opportunity, every conflict. is like an iceberg. What you can see on the surface is maybe 10% of what's actually happening. Beneath that visible surface lies a whole invisible world. Hidden motivations, unspoken power dynamics, emotional histories, cultural undercurrents, and systemic forces that are often far more influential than anything being said out loud. Most people navigate entirely on the surface. They respond to what's visible, react to what's obvious, and then wonder why things didn't go the way they expected. Strategic thinkers learn to read beneath the waterline. And that ability, more than almost anything else, separates people who consistently get the outcomes they want from people who are perpetually confused about why things don't work out. So let's go beneath the surface together. The first invisible layer is real motivation. What people say they want and what they actually want are frequently two very different things. Someone might tell you they want a more efficient process, but what they really want is to feel in control. Someone might say they want to collaborate, but what they actually want is recognition. Someone might argue passionately for a particular solution, but what they're really protecting is their ego and their need to be right. You cannot navigate this layer by listening to words alone. You have to watch patterns. What does this person consistently move toward? What drains them and what lights them up? How do they respond when things don't go their way? The answers to these questions tell you far more about someone's real motivations than anything they'll ever say directly. And here's the compassionate truth about this. Most people aren't consciously hiding their motivations. They often don't know what their real motivations are. They're operating on autopilot, driven by needs they've never examined. When you can see those needs clearly, without judgment, you become extraordinarily effective at working with people rather than against them. The second invisible layer is power dynamics. Every group, every organization, every family has an official structure and a real structure. The person with the title isn't always the person with the influence. Sometimes the most powerful person in a room is the one who seems to have the least formal authority, but whom everyone else looks to before making a decision. The executive assistant who's been there 20 years. The team member everyone trusts. The quiet voice in the corner that the leader always consults before finalizing anything. Strategic thinkers map these informal networks carefully. They understand that if you want to create change within any system, you need to know where influence actually lives, not just where the org chart says it lives. The third invisible layer is historical context. Every current situation has a backstory. Decisions made years ago are still casting shadows on today. Relationships that formed or fractured before you arrived are still shaping the dynamics you're walking into. Patterns that have repeated for decades don't disappear just because someone new shows up with fresh ideas. When you take the time to understand this history, even imperfectly, you stop making the expensive mistake of proposing solutions that failed 3 years ago without knowing they failed. You start to understand why certain suggestions meet invisible walls of resistance. You begin to see that what looks like obstruction is often just scar tissue from old wounds that haven't healed. The fourth invisible layer is cultural dynamics, the unwritten rules about how things really work in any group or organization. Every culture has things that are celebrated and things that are punished, topics that can be raised openly, and topics that must never be mentioned. These rules are rarely written down anywhere, but violate them, and you'll know immediately, even if nobody can quite articulate why things suddenly feel different. Strategic thinkers learn to read cultural signals the way a traveler learns to read a new country. They observe before they act. They ask questions before they make assumptions. They move with the current of the culture rather than swimming furiously against it, at least until they understand the current well enough to know which parts of it are worth challenging. The fifth invisible layer is systemic forces, the larger currents of economics, technology, demographics, and social change that are reshaping entire landscapes whether you're paying attention or not. Some of the most brilliant individual efforts have been defeated not by poor execution, but by swimming against a tide that was simply too powerful to overcome. And some of the most impressive-looking successes were less about genius and more about having the wisdom to ride a powerful wave in the right direction. Strategic thinkers keep one eye on these larger forces at all times, not obsessively, but with the awareness of someone who knows that the weather affects every journey. So it's worth checking the forecast before you leave the house. Reading the invisible game ultimately requires intellectual humility. The moment you decide you've completely figured out what's happening in a situation, you stop looking for new information. And the moment you stop looking is exactly when you become most vulnerable to being surprised. Stay curious. Stay a little uncertain. Let your understanding remain alive and updating, because the situations you're navigating are alive and updating too. Chapter 5. Making Decisions Like Your Future Self. Would thank you for every significant outcome in your life, the relationships you're in, the career you're building, the financial situation you're navigating, the health you're experiencing, is the accumulated result of thousands of decisions, most of them made quickly, under pressure, with incomplete information. That's not a depressing thought. That's actually the most empowering thing you could realize, because if decisions created where you are, then better decisions will create where you're going. Strategic decision-making isn't about being coldly analytical or removing emotion from the process. Emotion is information. It tells you what you value, what you fear, what matters deeply to you. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion, but to stop being hijacked by it. There's a difference between feeling afraid and letting fear make your decisions for you. The first is human. The second is costly. The foundation of better decisions is framing. And this is where most people go wrong before they've even started thinking. The way you frame a situation determines which options you'll consider and how you'll evaluate them. The same set of facts can be framed as a catastrophe or as a pivot point, as a problem you're trapped in, or as a constraint that's forcing you toward creativity. How you hold the situation shapes everything that follows. Before you make any significant decision, pause and ask yourself, am I framing this accurately? Or am I framing this the way fear is telling me to? You might be framing a necessary change as an unacceptable loss. You might be framing a risk as a certainty. You might be framing an opportunity as a problem because it would require you to step outside your comfort zone. Get the framing right first. Everything else becomes clearer. The second step is expanding your options. Most people in a decision consider 2 or 3 obvious alternatives and pick one. Strategic decision makers refuse to settle for the obvious choices. They ask, what else is possible here that I haven't considered yet? They challenge the false constraints that limit most people's thinking, the assumptions about what's practical, what's allowed, what's realistic, and they discover that many of these constraints exist only in their own minds. Some of the best decisions in history looked unreasonable before they were made, not reckless, unreasonable, as in outside the narrow frame of what reason, as it was being applied in that moment, could see. Expanding your options requires the courage to think beyond what seems immediately obvious. The third step is probabilistic thinking, which sounds technical, but is really just this. Stop evaluating options based only on their most likely outcome, and start considering the range of possible outcomes and how likely each one is. A decision that looks safe because its most likely outcome is fine might be deeply unwise if its worst-case outcome is catastrophic. A decision that looks risky because its most likely outcome is uncertain might be exactly right if its upside potential is enormous and the downside is manageable. This kind of thinking also extends to understanding how your decisions affect others' decisions. If you choose option A, how will the people around you respond? And how will their response affect whether option A still makes sense? Good strategic decision-making is never just about you in isolation. It's about the whole chessboard. One of the most important and underrated steps is the pre-mortem. Before you commit to a decision, imagine it's 6 months from now and the decision has completely failed. What went wrong? What did you miss? What assumptions proved false? This isn't negative thinking. It's a powerful way to surface the risks and blind spots that enthusiasm or hope might be covering. The risks you see in a pre-mortem are the ones you can prepare for. The risks you never examine are the ones that derail you. Finally, strategic decision-making requires knowing when to stop analyzing and act. There is a point, different for every decision, where gathering more information stops adding clarity and starts adding delay. Waiting for perfect certainty is a strategy that never pays off because perfect certainty never arrives. Strategic thinkers develop a feel for when they have enough information to act wisely, even if not enough to act with certainty, and they move. Chapter 6. The Art of Thinking. 3 moves ahead. Chess masters don't just see the board as it is. They see the board as it will be 5, 10, 15 moves from now. And they make decisions in the present based on that future vision. You don't have to play chess to develop this skill, but you do have to practice it deliberately. Thinking ahead starts with a simple but profound shift, understanding that every action creates a chain reaction. When you make a move, others respond. Their response creates a new situation. That new situation requires further response. Most people think one step ahead, considering the immediate effect of their action. Strategic thinkers map sequences several steps deep, asking not just what will happen, but what will happen after what happens. This kind of thinking requires what game theorists call backward induction, starting with your desired end state and working backwards to identify which moves today actually lead there. This is enormously clarifying because when you trace the path backwards, you often discover that the move you were about to make is pointing in completely the wrong direction, even though it seemed logical in isolation. And you discover that some moves which feel uncomfortable or counterintuitive right now are actually critical steps toward where you want to go. Thinking ahead also requires deeply understanding the other players in your situation. Different people have fundamentally different orientations. Some are naturally collaborative. They're looking for ways everyone can win. And if you approach them competitively, you'll confuse and alienate them. Some are competitive by nature. They see most interactions as contests, and if you approach them with naive openness, they'll interpret it as weakness. Some are principled. They'll hold their position even when it costs them, and trying to pressure them with incentives alone will fail. Some are pragmatic. They'll shift positions based on what makes sense in the moment, which makes them flexible allies and unpredictable opponents. Knowing which type of person you're dealing with lets you anticipate their responses far more accurately and design your approach accordingly. Strategic anticipation also involves something called scenario branching, mapping out different possible futures and preparing your response for each one. Rather than assuming one particular outcome and planning exclusively for that, you ask, if X happens, I'll do A. If Y happens, I'll do B. If something unexpected happens, here's how I'll orient myself quickly. Having these contingent responses pre-thought means you can act decisively when things shift, while others are still in shock trying to figure out what happened. There's a beautiful paradox at the heart of thinking ahead. The more clearly you can envision multiple futures, the less attached you become to any single one. And that detachment actually makes you a better decision maker in the present. You stop desperately needing things to go a particular way. You become genuinely flexible. And flexible people navigate uncertainty far more effectively than rigid ones because they bend without breaking when the unexpected arrives. One more thing about thinking ahead, and this one is deeply human. Sometimes the right move is not the surprising, unpredictable one. Sometimes the right move is exactly what everyone expects, because your opponent has prepared for everything except the obvious. Strategic thinking isn't about being clever for its own sake. It's about doing what actually works. Sometimes that's unconventional. Sometimes it's the most straightforward path available. Wisdom is knowing the difference. The ability to think ahead compounds over time. Every situation you navigate thoughtfully adds to your mental library of patterns and sequences. Every prediction you make, whether it proves right or wrong, sharpens your model of how things unfold. The person who has been deliberately practicing anticipatory thinking for 5 years sees the world in a fundamentally different way than the person who has been reacting to it for the same 5 years. You are building that library right now. Every chapter of this audiobook is adding to it, and every situation you apply these ideas to will deepen it further. Chapter 7. The Leverage Multiplier Effect. Let me tell you about 2 gardeners. The first gardener works from sunrise to sunset. Every day, with incredible discipline, he digs, plants, waters, and weeds by hand. He's exhausted every evening, but he's proud of his effort. The garden grows slowly, modestly, exactly proportional to the hours he puts in. The second gardener works differently. Before she plants a single seed, she studies the land. She identifies which corner gets the most sun, which soil holds moisture longest, which slope naturally channels rainwater. She builds a simple irrigation system that waters the garden while she sleeps. She plants perennials alongside her annuals, things that come back year after year without replanting. She works fewer hours than the first gardener, but her garden is 3 times the size and twice as healthy. Both gardeners work hard, but only one of them is working with leverage. This is what the leverage multiplier effect looks like in real life. And once you start seeing it, you'll find it everywhere. Positional leverage is the first type, and it might be the most powerful. It comes from placing yourself at crucial junctions, points in a network or system where you naturally encounter opportunities, information, and influence that others simply don't have access to. Think of the person who becomes the connector between two groups that don't normally interact. Every introduction they make creates value for both sides, and both sides remember who made it happen. Over time, this person doesn't just have relationships. They have a position that generates relationships automatically. Positional leverage isn't about being pushy or political. It's about asking yourself honestly, where does value flow in the systems I'm part of? And am I positioned anywhere near those flows? If you're not, that's not fate. That's a positioning decision waiting to be made. Informational leverage is the second type. Having better information than others, or seeing deeper implications in the same information everyone has access to, creates asymmetric advantages that can be truly remarkable. The investor who reads widely across disciplines spots the connection between a demographic shift and a technology trend before either the demographers or the technologists do. The manager who genuinely listens to frontline employees knows where the real problems are long before they show up in any report. This kind of leverage doesn't require insider access or anything unethical. It requires curiosity, a genuine, sustained interest in understanding how things work across multiple domains. The more broadly you learn, the more unusual connections you can make. And unusual connections are exactly where the most valuable insights live. Relationship leverage is the third type. And let's be clear about what this means, because it's often misunderstood. Relationship leverage isn't about using people. It's about creating genuine value exchanges where everyone genuinely benefits. The right relationship can give you access to resources, opportunities, perspectives, and capabilities that would take you years to build on your own, and vice versa. You become more capable through them, and they become more capable through you. The key to building relationship leverage is thinking long-term and giving first. Not transactionally, not with a mental ledger of debts and credits, but genuinely. Help people achieve their goals without keeping score. Show up during hard times, not just good ones. Be interested in people's lives, not just their usefulness to you. These habits, practiced consistently, build a web of relationships that becomes one of your most durable life assets. Technological leverage is the fourth type, and in our current moment, it's more accessible than at any point in history. Technology allows you to automate, scale, and amplify your efforts in ways that were unimaginable a generation ago. But a real leverage isn't in using existing tools. It's in understanding where technology is heading and positioning yourself to benefit from those trends before they become obvious to everyone. The people who built leverage through technology weren't always the ones who invented it. Often, they were the ones who recognized its implications early and moved accordingly. Temporal leverage is the fifth type, and perhaps the most underrated. Time, applied strategically, compounds in ways that feel almost magical. A small daily investment in a skill, a relationship, a body of knowledge, or a financial asset creates something disproportionate over years that no single large effort could produce. The question isn't just what should I do, but what should I do consistently over time that will compound into something extraordinary. Here's the beautiful and slightly humbling truth about leverage. It amplifies everything, including mistakes. The same principles that create extraordinary positive results can create extraordinary negative ones if applied without wisdom. Leverage isn't a shortcut around hard work and good judgment. It's a multiplier that requires both, just applied more intelligently, at the right points, in the right ways. Always ask yourself before committing to a path, is there a more leveraged way to achieve this objective? Not because you're looking to avoid effort, but because the most elegant solution, the one that creates the most value with the most grace, is almost always a leveraged one. Chapter 8. The words that change everything. Every conversation you've ever had has shaped your life in some way. Some conversations opened doors. Some closed them. Some healed something. Some planted a seed of doubt that grew into a wall. Communication isn't just how we exchange information. It's how we build reality together with other people. And most of us have never been taught to do it strategically. Strategic communication doesn't mean being manipulative or scripted. It means being intentional. Understanding that how you communicate is often more important than what you communicate, and bringing genuine thought to both. The first foundation is understanding something that seems simple but changes everything. People make decisions based on emotion and justify them with logic. This isn't a flaw in human nature. It's a feature. Emotions are fast, powerful, and deeply connected to what we truly value. Logic is slower, more deliberate, and often arrives after the emotional decision has already been made, ready to provide the justification. What this means for you is that if you want to communicate in a way that actually moves people, you have to engage their emotional reality first. Facts and figures alone rarely change minds. But a story that makes someone feel something, that creates recognition, resonance, or genuine curiosity, opens a door that pure logic could never unlock. Once that door is open, logic can walk through it and seal the deal. The second foundation is knowing your audience, not in a generic sense, but specifically and personally. Different people process information differently. Some people are data-driven. They want evidence, specifics, and clear logical structure. Others are story-driven. They want to understand through narrative and example. Some people need social proof. They want to know that others have already walked this path successfully. Others want to feel like pioneers, the first to embrace something new. Adapting to your audience isn't being fake. It's being respectful. It's the difference between speaking at someone and speaking with them, meeting them where they actually are rather than where you wish they were. Framing is one of the most powerful tools in strategic communication, and it operates almost invisibly. The same proposal, framed as protecting what you've already built versus taking a risk on something new, will land completely differently with a risk-averse person, even if the actual content is identical. Strategic communicators learn to understand what their audience values most and frame their message in ways that genuinely align with those values. This isn't spin, it's clarity. It's presenting truth in the language that makes it most visible. Timing is the next dimension. The best message delivered at the wrong moment falls flat. The right message delivered when someone is genuinely ready to receive it can change everything. Strategic communicators pay attention to emotional states, contextual pressures, and natural openings. They don't force important conversations into moments when the other person is stressed, distracted, or defended. They create the right conditions, and sometimes that means waiting. There's a principle in strategic influence that's worth holding close. People resist being pushed, but will move freely toward things they feel they've chosen. The most effective communication doesn't feel like persuasion at all. It creates the conditions for people to arrive at a conclusion themselves. Through questions that lead them toward insight, through stories that allow them to draw their own parallels, through options framed in ways that make the best choice feel natural. This requires patience and a genuine respect for other people's autonomy, but it produces something that blunt persuasion never can: commitment. When people feel they chose something, they own it. They defend it. They follow through. When they feel they were pushed into something, they look for exits the moment the pressure releases. Building credibility is a long game, and there are no shortcuts. Credibility comes from consistency, showing up reliably, delivering what you promise, telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable, caring visibly about others' outcomes, not just your own. People are remarkably good at detecting authenticity, even if they can't always articulate how. Real credibility can't be faked because it's built from dozens of small moments that accumulate over time into a reputation that either opens doors or quietly closes them. One last dimension: nonverbal communication carries more weight than most people realize. Your tone, your pace, your body language, your eye contact, these communicate constantly, often more truthfully than your words. Strategic communicators learn to manage these signals consciously, not to perform inauthentically, but to ensure that their nonverbal communication is aligned with their genuine intention rather than broadcasting anxiety, disinterest, or disconnection that they don't actually feel. Every interaction leaves a residue. It shifts slightly how people think of you, how they feel around you, what they expect from you next time. Strategic communicators think beyond the immediate conversation to the relationship it's building or eroding, one exchange at a time. Chapter 9. When everything falls apart and what to do about it. Let's talk about the moment you dread, the phone call you didn't expect, the email that changes everything, the day when something you built, something you counted on, something you loved, cracks or collapses or disappears. Crisis is not optional. It's part of the contract of being alive and trying. Every person who has ever built anything meaningful has also experienced the particular terror of watching something important fall apart. This isn't bad luck or personal failure. It's the natural turbulence of a life lived forward. The question was never whether crisis would arrive. The question is always, who will you be when it does? The first principle of crisis navigation is preparation before the storm. Not paranoia, preparation. There's a difference. A paranoid person imagines danger everywhere and is paralyzed by it. A prepared person acknowledges that difficulty is coming in some form at some point and builds quietly for it during calm times. Multiple income streams, diverse skills, strong relationships across different circles, financial buffers, emotional reserves built through consistent self-care. These aren't luxuries, they're infrastructure. The second principle is clarity of thought in the chaos. Crisis triggers ancient survival responses. The body floods with stress hormones, attention narrows, thinking becomes reactive and short-term. This is exactly the wrong mode for navigating complex situations with high stakes. Strategic crisis navigators train themselves through practice, through mindfulness, through deliberately slowing down before responding, to remain clear precisely when everything around them is loud. This clarity starts with accurate assessment rather than catastrophizing. When crisis hits, our minds have a powerful tendency to imagine the worst possible interpretation of events. But the actual situation, as bad as it might genuinely be, is almost always less catastrophic than our initial fear story about it. Ask yourself, what has actually changed? What do I still have available? What options remain open? These questions cut through the emotional noise and return you to solid ground. The third principle is speed combined with wisdom. In crisis, windows open and close quickly. Waiting for perfect certainty is a luxury the situation doesn't offer. But acting impulsively from pure panic is equally dangerous. The sweet spot is informed speed, moving quickly based on the best judgment available, while staying alert to new information that might require adjustment. The fourth principle, and this one is perhaps the most transformative, is looking for the opportunity inside the crisis. This isn't toxic positivity. It's not pretending the crisis isn't real or painful. It's recognizing that when established patterns break down, when old structures shake loose, when everyone around you is scrambling to protect the status quo, new positions become available, new paths open, new advantages emerge for those who are clear-eyed enough to see them. Some of history's most significant turning points in businesses, in careers, in personal lives were born directly from crisis. Not despite the crisis, but through it. The crisis created the conditions that made the breakthrough possible. The final principle is post-traumatic growth, the real kind, not the Instagram version. True growth from crisis isn't about bouncing back to who you were before. It's about emerging as someone larger, with more wisdom, more resilience, more compassion, more capability than the person who walked into the storm. Every difficult experience you've navigated has added something to you that easier times could never have given. Strategic thinkers don't just survive crises. They mine them carefully, patiently, honestly, for the irreplaceable education they contain. Chapter 10. building the system that runs your life. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. If you looked honestly at how you spend your time, your attention, and your energy over the course of a typical week, does it match what you say your priorities are, not what you wish your priorities were, not what you tell people at dinner when they ask what you're working toward, what your actual behavior, tracked hour by hour, would reveal your priorities to be? For most people, there's a gap, sometimes a small one, often a significant one. And that gap between stated priorities and lived reality is where most unfulfilled potential quietly disappears. Closing that gap requires more than willpower or intention. It requires a system. Think of it this way. Your phone doesn't work because someone wishes it to work. It works because it runs on a carefully designed operating system that coordinates all its functions toward coherent outcomes. Without that underlying system, the most powerful hardware in the world is just an expensive paperweight. The same is true of you. Your goals, your values, your ambitions, they're the hardware. Your strategic operating system is what makes them actually run. The foundation of your personal operating system is your mission and value framework. And I want to be very clear about what this is and what it isn't. It is not a motivational poster. It is not a list of inspiring words you write down once and never look at again. A genuine mission and value framework is a decision-making tool. It's what you consult, consciously or instinctively, when you're facing a choice between two competing priorities, when an opportunity appears that might be a distraction in disguise, when a relationship demands more than it gives, when the path forward isn't obvious. Your framework needs to be specific enough to provide real guidance. Be successful is not a framework. Build a career in sustainable design that allows me to be present for my family while contributing to something I genuinely believe in. That's a framework. It immediately starts answering questions. Does this opportunity align? Does this relationship support or undermine this direction? Is this how I want to be spending these hours? Most importantly, your framework needs to be genuinely yours, not what you think you should want, not what your parents hoped for, not what looks impressive on paper. The frameworks that actually guide behavior are the ones rooted in authentic values, the things you care about when nobody's watching, the work that energizes rather than depletes you, the kind of person you want to be when you're being most fully yourself. The second component is a systematic approach to information and environmental scanning. Strategic thinkers don't wait for important information to find them accidentally. They build structures, reading habits, conversations, relationships, observation practices that ensure they're consistently aware of what's shifting in the domains that matter to them. Not consumed by information, but well informed about the signals that carry genuine strategic weight. The key skill here is developing filters. The modern world doesn't suffer from a shortage of information. It drowns in it. The strategic advantage belongs to the person who can quickly distinguish between noise and signal, between information that's merely interesting and information that's genuinely important. This discernment is developed over time through practice and reflection, but it starts with asking one simple question about everything you consume. Does this help me understand something that matters to my direction, or is this just filling time? The third component is decision-making frameworks for for different types of choices. Not all decisions deserve the same amount of deliberation. Routine decisions, what to eat, how to structure your morning, should be systematized to preserve your mental energy for decisions that actually matter. Major decisions, career shifts, significant financial commitments, key relationship choices deserve structured, unhurried analysis. Crisis decisions need predetermined triggers and response protocols, because crisis is exactly when clear thinking is hardest to access and most critically needed. The fourth component is a planning system that connects your daily actions to your long-term direction. This is the bridge that most people never build. They set annual goals and then spend their days responding to whatever's loudest, and wonder at the end of the year why the goals didn't happen. A functioning planning system ensures that your daily activities feed into weekly progress. Your weekly progress supports monthly objectives, and your monthly achievements move you genuinely forward on the things that matter most. This doesn't have to be elaborate. In fact, the simpler, the better. A planning system you actually use consistently is infinitely more valuable than a sophisticated one you abandon after 2 weeks. The question to ask yourself every morning isn't what needs to happen today. It's what is the most important thing I could do today that serves where I'm actually trying to go? The fifth component is honest, regular feedback loops. Strategy without feedback is just wishful thinking with extra steps. You need mechanisms that tell you what's working, what isn't, and why. And you need the courage to look at that information clearly, rather than through the flattering lens of confirmation bias. This means scheduled reflection time, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever rhythm fits your life. It means asking hard questions. Am I actually progressing? Are my assumptions still accurate? Am I investing my resources where they create the most impact? Or have I drifted into comfortable but unproductive habits? The answers to these questions, honestly faced, are where real growth lives. Your strategic operating system is never finished. It evolves as you evolve, as your circumstances change, as your understanding deepens. Think of it less as a structure you build once and more as a living practice you refine continuously. The goal isn't perfection, it's direction. A life that's consistently, intentionally, moving toward what genuinely matters to you. Chapter 11. The hidden psychology behind every outcome. Everything that has ever happened between human beings has happened through perception, not through objective reality, through perceived reality. Two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different understandings of what occurred, what it meant, and what it implies about the future. This isn't a bug in human cognition, it's the fundamental nature of how minds work. And understanding it is one of the most powerful strategic capabilities you can develop. Because if you understand how perception is shaped in yourself and in others, you gain access to an entirely different level of influence, not manipulation, understanding. There's a profound difference. Let's start with the biases that shape how people process information, because they shape yours too, whether you're aware of them or not. Confirmation bias causes people to unconsciously seek out information that confirms what they already believe while filtering out information that challenges it. This isn't stupidity. It's efficiency. The brain is managing an overwhelming flow of information and uses existing beliefs as shortcuts to decide what's worth attending to. But it means that once someone has formed a view, presenting contradictory evidence often strengthens their original belief rather than weakening it, because the act of defending their position reinforces it psychologically. The strategic implication: if you want to shift someone's thinking, don't attack their existing belief head on. Find the genuine common ground first. Build a bridge of agreement before introducing anything that challenges their current framework. The anchoring effect is another powerful force. Whatever number, idea, or framing someone encounters first becomes their reference point, their anchor, and everything subsequent gets evaluated relative to it, even when the anchor was arbitrary. This is why a salary negotiation that starts with a high number tends to settle higher. Why a product priced at $200 next to a $500 product seems like a bargain. Why the first proposal in a meeting tends to shape the entire discussion that follows. Strategic thinkers set anchors intentionally. They understand that the first number named, the first frame introduced, the first option presented carries disproportionate weight, and they use that knowledge thoughtfully. The psychology of commitment and consistency is perhaps the most human of all these principles. Once someone has publicly committed to a position, they will go to remarkable lengths to remain consistent with that commitment, even when new evidence suggests they were wrong. Changing your mind requires admitting that your previous judgment was flawed, which threatens both self-esteem and social standing. It's psychologically easier to rationalize staying the course than to acknowledge error and change direction. Understanding this creates a powerful strategic tool. Seek small, genuine agreements before asking for large ones. When someone says yes to a small commitment that aligns with your direction, they create psychological momentum toward larger agreements. Not through manipulation, through the natural human desire for consistency. Social proof is the invisible hand that guides enormous amounts of human behavior. When people are uncertain about what to do, they look at what others, particularly others they identify with and respect, are doing, and they use that as their guide. This creates powerful momentum effects where early adopters influence many others, where visible popularity creates actual popularity, where the perception of consensus shapes actual consensus. Strategic application demonstrate that credible, respected others have already embraced what you're advocating. Make adoption visible. Share genuine testimonials and real examples. The key word is genuine. Manufactured social proof collapses the moment it's recognized as such, and the trust damage is severe. Reciprocity is one of the deepest social instincts humans have. When someone does something genuinely beneficial for you, you feel an almost compulsive urge to return the favor. This creates a remarkable opportunity. By consistently providing real value to others, before asking for anything, without obvious calculation, you build a reservoir of goodwill and obligation that becomes available when you genuinely need it. The crucial qualifier is genuine. People are exquisitely sensitive to the difference between someone who helps them because they care and someone who helps them as an investment strategy. The first creates deep loyalty. The second creates wariness. Give because you actually want to see people succeed, and the strategic benefits will follow naturally as a byproduct of genuine generosity. Finally, authority and expertise shape deference in powerful ways. People naturally trust perceived experts, especially in areas where they feel uncertain about their own judgment. Building genuine authority in your field through consistent quality, accurate insights, demonstrated results creates a platform of influence that extends well beyond your direct efforts. When you speak, people listen differently. When you recommend, people act differently. That's leverage of a deeply human kind. The most important application of all this psychological knowledge is turned inward. You are subject to every single one of these biases too. The strategic thinker who understands psychology but never examines their own is like a doctor who diagnoses everyone else's illness while ignoring their own symptoms. Self-awareness about your psychological patterns, your confirmation biases, your emotional triggers, your consistency traps, is what separates someone who uses psychology wisely from someone who is merely used by it. Chapter 12. The network that multiplies everything. There is a line that gets repeated in professional development circles so often it's become almost invisible. Your network is your net worth. Most people hear it, nod vaguely, and then continue approaching relationships the same way they always have, either transactionally, collecting contacts like business cards with no genuine connection, or passively, waiting for relationships to happen rather than building them intentionally. Neither approach builds the kind of network that actually transforms what's possible for you. Strategic alliance building starts with a fundamental mindset shift. From what can this person do for me to what can we create together, and what can I contribute to make them genuinely better off. This shift sounds simple. Its implications are enormous. When you approach relationships as a genuine contributor rather than a strategic extractor, something remarkable happens. People feel it. They open up differently. They remember you differently. They think of you when opportunities arise, not because they feel obligated to repay a transaction, but because they genuinely want good things to happen for someone who has been good to them. Authentic generosity creates a quality of connection that no networking tactic can replicate. Understanding network effects changes how you think about your relationships structurally. Each valuable person you add to your world doesn't just add their own value. They potentially connect with every other person in your network, creating new combinations of value that didn't exist before. When you introduce two people who need each other but haven't found each other, you create value for both of them and deepen your relationship with each. You become something more than a contact. You become a connector. And connectors occupy some of the most valuable positions in any human system. The research on strong ties versus weak ties reveals something counterintuitive. Your weak ties, the people you know casually, interact with infrequently, who move in different circles than your close friends and colleagues, are often more valuable for discovering new opportunities than your strong ties. Your close circle tends to know what you know, move in the same spaces you move in, see the same opportunities you see. Your weak ties expose you to entirely different worlds of information, possibility, and connection. This means that strategic networking isn't just about deepening existing relationships. It's about deliberately maintaining a diverse cross-domain web of genuine connections across different industries, disciplines, life stages, and backgrounds. The most interesting and unexpected opportunities in your life will almost certainly come through this peripheral network, not your inner circle. Building strategic alliances also requires understanding complementary strengths. The most powerful partnerships aren't between people who are identical. They're between people whose different strengths combine into something neither could achieve alone. Your ability to generate creative vision combined with someone else's ability to execute with precision. Your deep domain expertise combined with someone else's broad network. Your analytical rigor combined with someone else's emotional intelligence. 1+1 in these partnerships genuinely equals something closer to 5. The foundation of all of this, the thing that makes every other networking principle actually work, is showing up consistently over time. Relationships, like gardens, require tending, not constantly, not obsessively, but regularly and genuinely. The people who build the most powerful networks aren't necessarily the most extroverted or the most impressive. They're the ones who remember to follow up, who check in during difficult times, not just good ones, who celebrate others' wins with genuine enthusiasm, who are reliably present in the lives of the people who matter to them. Build that kind of presence and watch what it builds back. Chapter 13. Playing the Long Game. Most people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and catastrophically underestimate what they can build in 10. This isn't a motivational slogan, it's a mathematical reality rooted in how compounding works. And it applies not just to money, but to skills, relationships, reputation, knowledge, and character. The person who makes small, consistent, strategic investments in the right directions over a decade doesn't just end up slightly better off than the person who doesn't. They end up in a completely different universe of possibility. Long-term strategic positioning is about understanding this deeply and making choices today that your future self will look back on with profound gratitude. The foundation of long-term thinking is recognizing something both liberating and sobering. Your current position is not your permanent position. Every skill you're building right now, every relationship you're nurturing, every reputation you're establishing, every habit you're cementing, these are not just activities filling your present days. They are the infrastructure of a future that doesn't yet exist, but is being constructed, brick by brick, by the choices you make today. The question worth asking yourself regularly, not obsessively, but with genuine curiosity, is, are the things I'm investing my time and energy in right now going to be valuable in 10 years? Are they building something that compounds, or are they just consuming the present without creating the future? This requires developing what economists call dynamic capabilities. Not just the ability to do specific things well today, but the ability to learn new things, adapt to changing conditions, and reconfigure your skills and resources as the world evolves around you. In a world that's changing as rapidly as ours, the most dangerous position is being excellent at something that's becoming obsolete. The safest position is being someone who can continuously learn, adapt, and find new forms of value to create. This doesn't mean being unfocused or perpetually reinventing yourself. It means building deep expertise in valuable domains while also cultivating the meta skill of learning itself. So that when the landscape shifts, as it inevitably will, you're not starting from zero. You're applying proven learning capabilities to a new terrain. Understanding megatrends is one of the highest leverage activities a long-term strategic thinker can engage in. Megatrends are the large, slow-moving forces that are reshaping entire societies and industries over decades. Technological shifts like artificial intelligence and biotechnology, demographic changes like aging populations and urbanization, environmental pressures, evolving social values. You cannot predict exactly how these forces will manifest, but you can position yourself so that multiple possible manifestations are favorable to you. Think of it like building a house. You can't control the weather that will come, but you can build on high ground with strong foundations facing the right direction. When the storms come, as they always do, your positioning determines whether you're sheltered or exposed. Option value is a concept that deserves far more attention than it usually receives in discussions of personal development. Some investments don't pay off immediately. They pay off by opening doors that would otherwise remain closed. Learning a second language might feel inefficient when you're busy and it has no immediate application. But 5 years from now, it might be exactly what allows you to build something in an emerging market. Developing a relationship in an adjacent industry might seem tangential right now, but when you decide to pivot, that relationship might be the bridge that makes everything possible. Option-creating activities often look like inefficiency in the short term, but in an uncertain world, and the world is always uncertain, preserving your ability to choose among multiple paths is extraordinarily valuable. Strategic long-term thinkers are willing to sacrifice some immediate optimization in exchange for future flexibility. They understand that having options is itself a form of wealth. Reputation compounds in ways that are both beautiful and demanding. Every interaction you have, every piece of work you produce, every commitment you keep or break, these accumulate into how others perceive your character and your capabilities. In the early stages of a career or a project, reputation feels almost irrelevant, but over time, it becomes the foundation on which everything else is built. Doors open for people with strong reputations that remain firmly closed to equally talented people whose reputations are ambiguous or damaged. Building long-term reputation requires a particular kind of integrity, not the performative kind, but the kind that shows up when nobody's watching. Delivering quality on the projects that seem minor, treating the person who can do nothing for you with the same respect you'd show to someone important. Keeping the small promises, not just the big ones. These behaviors feel unremarkable in isolation, but accumulated over years, they create something genuinely rare, a reputation that consistently opens more doors than it closes. Legacy thinking shifts your perspective in a way that few other practices can. When you ask yourself, not just what do I want to achieve for myself, but what do I want to have contributed, and who do I want to have helped along the way? Something changes. Your decisions start being evaluated against a different standard. Short-term compromises that would diminish your long-term contribution become less attractive. Investments in others' growth and success start feeling like exactly what they are, among the highest return activities available to you. Legacy isn't about monuments or being remembered after you're gone. It's about understanding that the impact of your choices extends beyond your immediate circumstances, to the people you mentor, the organizations you strengthen, the ideas you spread, the positive changes you help catalyze. When you hold that perspective, it makes the long game feel not just strategically wise, but deeply meaningful. Chapter 14, where strategy meets the real world. Here is the humbling truth that every strategic thinker eventually confronts. The most elegant strategy in the world, sitting in your head or captured in your notebook, creates exactly zero value. Strategy only matters when it becomes action, and action only creates the results you want when it's sustained, adapted, and executed with both discipline and intelligence. This is where most strategies die, not in the planning, in the doing. Not because the strategy was wrong, because the bridge between strategy and consistent action was never properly built. Translating vision into tasks is the first and most critical bridge to build. Strategic objectives tend to live at a high level of abstraction. Build a thriving freelance business, develop deep expertise in machine learning, create financial independence. These are directions, not instructions. They don't tell anyone what to do tomorrow morning. Strategic execution begins with the patient, sometimes humbling work of breaking these abstractions down into progressively more specific levels until you reach concrete, completable actions that a real person with a real schedule and real limitations can actually do. This breakdown process is revealing. It exposes resource requirements you hadn't accounted for. It surfaces dependencies between different components. This can't happen until that is done. It reveals unrealistic assumptions that sounded fine at the strategic level, but don't survive contact with operational reality. These revelations aren't failures. They're exactly the information you need to build a plan that will actually work rather than one that just sounds good. Systems over willpower is perhaps the most important principle of strategic execution, and it's the one that most people learn only after exhausting themselves through repeated cycles of enthusiasm and collapse. Willpower is real, but it's a finite resource. It depletes through the day, through stress, through decision fatigue. Any execution plan that depends on sustained willpower will eventually fail when life gets difficult, which life reliably does. Systems don't depend on how you feel. A system runs whether you're motivated or tired, whether the weather is beautiful or miserable, whether something difficult happened this morning or not. Strategic executives spend their energy building systems, structures, routines, environments, accountability mechanisms that make the desired behavior automatic rather than effortful. The goal is to make doing the right thing easy and not doing it slightly uncomfortable rather than the reverse. Resource allocation is where strategic intent meets hard reality. You have finite time, finite energy, finite money, finite attention. These resources must be allocated across competing priorities. And the allocation you choose, consciously or by default, determines your outcomes more than almost anything else. Poor resource allocation is one of the most common and costly reasons that well-conceived strategies fail. Every yes is a no to something else. Every hour you spend in one direction is an hour you're not spending in another. Strategic executors make these trade-offs consciously and regularly, constantly asking whether their current allocation of resources still serves their strategic direction or whether drift has occurred and recalibration is needed. Building capability, not just completing tasks, is the mindset shift that separates good execution from great execution. Every project, every challenge, every execution activity is simultaneously an opportunity to build something that will make future execution easier and more powerful. The team you develop, the processes you refine, the skills you deepen, the systems you build, these don't just produce immediate results. They compound into an execution capability that becomes one of your most durable strategic advantages. Short-term thinking focuses only on the deliverable in front of you. Strategic execution thinking asks, how can I accomplish this immediate objective in a way that also makes me stronger for the next one? Communication and coordination become increasingly critical as your strategies grow in complexity and involve more people. The clearest strategic vision in your own mind creates no alignment if others can't understand how their work connects to it. Strategic executors develop the ability to translate high-level direction into language and frameworks that resonate at every level, helping each person understand not just what they're doing, but why it matters and how it fits into the larger picture. This translation work is not a distraction from execution. It is execution. People who understand the why behind their work make better decisions, adapt more intelligently when circumstances change, and bring more of their capability to the task than people who are simply following instructions without context. Measuring what matters requires distinguishing between the metrics that tell you how you're performing operationally and the metrics that tell you whether you're actually progressing strategically. Operational metrics tell you how efficiently you're doing things. Strategic metrics tell you whether you're doing the right things, whether you're moving toward your actual objectives, building the capabilities that matter, creating the positioning that will serve you in the future. Both matter. But strategic executors never let the comfort of hitting operational metrics substitute for the harder question of whether those operational activities are actually moving them in the right strategic direction. Chapter 15. The Person You're Becoming. We've covered a lot of ground together. 15 chapters, frameworks, principles, laws, techniques, strategies, pattern recognition and systems thinking, positioning and timing and leverage, decision-making and anticipation and communication, psychological dynamics and network effects, and long-term positioning. It's a lot to hold. And here's what I want you to understand about all of it. Knowing these concepts is not the destination. It's the beginning of a practice. The difference between someone who has read about strategic thinking and someone who has genuinely developed it is not the number of frameworks they can recall. It's that the true strategic thinker has internalized these principles so deeply that they operate naturally, almost unconsciously, freeing their conscious attention to focus on the unique, irreducible specifics of each situation they encounter. The frameworks have become intuition. The principles have become instinct. This integration takes time. It takes application. It takes the willingness to try these ideas in real situations, to notice what happens, to reflect honestly on why it happened, and to adjust your understanding accordingly. This is how genuine mastery develops, not through more reading, but through the cycle of application, reflection, and refinement, repeated over and over across diverse circumstances. Meta-strategic thinking. Thinking strategically about your own strategic thinking is the capability that accelerates this development most powerfully. It means regularly stepping back to examine your own frameworks. Where are my blind spots? Which of my strategic approaches are genuinely effective and which are just comfortable habits I've mistaken for wisdom? What assumptions am I making that I haven't examined recently? Every human being has cognitive biases, emotional patterns, and psychological tendencies that can distort strategic thinking when left unexamined. The strategic thinker who understands everyone else's psychology but never turns that understanding on themselves is operating with a significant handicap. Self-awareness isn't a soft skill tangential to strategy. It's a core strategic capability, one of the most important you can develop. Here's something that took many people years to understand, and I want to offer it to you now, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. Strategy without character is ultimately self-defeating. The most powerful strategic techniques, influence, leverage, positioning, psychological understanding, can be directed toward destruction as easily as toward creation. And strategies built on deceiving, manipulating, or exploiting others don't just cause harm to those people, they corrode the strategist from the inside. They create enemies with long memories. They build reputations that close doors rather than open them. They trade long-term flourishing for short-term advantage in a bargain that almost always looks worse in retrospect. Sustainable strategic success, the kind that compounds over decades and creates genuine fulfillment rather than just impressive-looking outcomes, is built on creating real value for others, treating people with genuine respect, and pursuing objectives that you'd be proud to articulate clearly to the people who know you best. This ethical foundation isn't a constraint on strategic effectiveness. It is strategic effectiveness, viewed through the right time horizon. There's a beautiful paradox at the pinnacle of strategic mastery that I want to leave you with. The highest level of strategic thinking eventually transcends strategy itself. Frameworks are tools. Principles are guides. Techniques are instruments. But there are moments in every life, in every meaningful relationship, in every truly creative endeavor, in every experience of genuine connection, where the most strategically intelligent thing you can do is to put the frameworks down entirely, to be simply, fully present, to respond honestly rather than calculatedly, to follow genuine curiosity rather than optimized positioning, to love someone without considering what it returns. Master strategic thinkers know when to think strategically and when to simply be openly, responsively, humanly present to whatever is actually happening. This wisdom, knowing when to apply the frameworks and when to transcend them, is perhaps the deepest form of strategic intelligence there is. You began this audiobook in one place. You're ending it somewhere different, even if you can't fully articulate the difference yet. Something has shifted in how you're seeing things. The frameworks are in you now, beginning to organize themselves, beginning to connect with experiences you've already had and questions you've already been living. This is how genuine learning works, not as a download, but as a germination. Your circumstances will keep changing. The world will keep evolving in ways that require new strategic approaches. Technologies will emerge, social landscapes will shift, opportunities you can't yet imagine will appear on your horizon. This is not a threat to your strategic development. It is the arena of it. Every new challenge is a new opportunity to practice what you've learned. Every unexpected turn is an invitation to apply these principles in a fresh context and deepen your understanding of them. You are not the same person who pressed play at the beginning of this audiobook, and the person you'll be 5 years from now if you apply these ideas consistently, reflect on them honestly, and continue developing them through real experience. We'll look back on this moment as one of the turning points, not because of anything this audiobook did, but because of what you chose to do with it. The frameworks are yours now. The principles are yours. The capacity for strategic thinking has always been yours. It was simply waiting for the right tools to activate it. Go build something worth building. Help someone who needs it. Create value that lasts. Think several moves ahead, but stay fully alive in the present. Play the long game and enjoy every step of playing it. This is the art of strategic thinking, and you have just begun to master it.